So I've started recording the session. So we'll get started. For the first hour today, we're going to be working on looking at cover letters and resumes, and then we'll have some time in the middle of the class for you guys to work on revisions. And welcome, Sarai. Glad you could make it. You can just throw that in the chair over here if you want. I just was telling Emily and Cody, I'm recording the session because Tim can't be with us during the day. I sent you an email with the link for today's Zoom session because I'd like everyone to zoom in so we can everybody be looking at the same document while we discuss the resumes and cover letters. And so we can help each other with potential revisions. And then we'll do that for at least the first hour, and then we'll take some, and then in the middle of the class, you'll have time to work on those revisions. I have also put in a quiz for this week. You can see it. You should be able to see it in the shell, so that will be part of that, and we'll discuss later on. Right over here. We'll discuss later on readings and stuff for the other for next week's assignments. If we look at this week's overview, I'll just pull that up. You'll see a number of different learning objectives, and so we're really trying to follow that outline. Again, since we have changed the way our courses are presented and changed a number of things about the way we're teaching them, I want you to feel free to offer feedback if there are suggestions you have, or if you find that things don't seem to be working well, because we're all trying to figure out how to work on this, how to make this work. So it's something that you two won't see in your medical classes, and if you graduate anyway, you won't see it all after this. But the medical classes will be going to this format in some either mods somewhere about mod 8, I think. So there will be some changes. So let's back up here and take a look. The textbook, which you have access to, really has a lot of very good information in it, and also has lots of suggestions, meaning some ideas as to how you can format your resumes, your cover letters, etc. The suggestions are just that. You have to pick something that you think works for you. And that might be just random, because you might look at them and say, well, all of these will work, which truthfully they will, but it's the one that you decide you'd like to work with. As I said on Monday, there are no strict rules. about that. There are some things that you can that are expected. 1 page for one for an initial resume. The information on the resume. Obviously, one of the biggest mistakes people make with resumes is not putting the proper contact information. The last mod when I was teaching this class, I had a couple of students who just wouldn't do it, would not put their street address and their heading. Well, that is really not appropriate. People need to get a hold of you. Employers do use snail mail still. So you do need to have that. If you have a preferred, I have some friends who do not give out street addresses, but they have a post office box. That's okay. That's okay. I think they're kind of paranoid, but that's my opinion. Considering there are so many ways people can find out what your address is anyway.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. But I mean, if that's your preference, but there has to be a way for people to contact you. People will leave off email or even phone numbers. Or they'll send a resume in attached to a cover letter. The cover letter has their contact information, but the resume page doesn't. Well, what's the first thing they do? They take them apart. And then your resume becomes anonymous. And you've already lost because it'll go no further. So that's one of the biggest mistakes. The next thing is that you really need to name the job you're looking for. You need to then list the qualifications you have for the job. Now, where do we get the qualification? Well, obviously, we have the qualifications. We know what our certifications are. We know what our skills are. But what we want to do is match those to the job description. And remember that in all cases, we match the resume to the position posting. Because if you send in a resume that looks like it's not for that position, to the person that makes that initial look, they're going to throw it away. Because they're likely to have a stack several inches high on their desk. Or several pages long in their inbox, depending on how they receive these things. So they're going to throw it away. And those qualifications, you need to make sure that the first ones on the list are the ones that they say are requirements for the job. Because again, if they're not right there, that's the end of the time that they're going to look at your resume. Then any other important qualifications that you think are useful. Looking at the list of things, basically what I call the nice to have list. The things that they would like to see but are not critical to the job. And then your education. They want to know what that is. If all you have is a high school diploma, that's what goes there. I'm not denigrating a high school diploma or a GED by any means. But if that's where your education stopped, that's what you put down. If you have a college degree, you don't need to put down high school. Extra information on a resume doesn't do you any good. So the assumption is if you have a college degree, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or anything else, that you must have either a high school diploma or a GED. So you don't need to put that down. And we're writing this as though we already have that degree. Now, your degree is conferred on you when you finish your program. So it doesn't matter when in the course of the year you finish your program. That's the date of your graduation. That's the date your degree is valid. If you choose to walk, we'd love to see you again at graduation, of course, but that's not your graduation date. So if you graduate in September, you have your degree in September. And it doesn't matter if the next graduation ceremony is June. That's just a ceremony, a celebration of your completion of your program. And it's a reflection of a difference in the way the education system at a school like College America is different from, a big public institution where you have defined semester periods and you know that your graduation is going to be in June of whatever year. So in fact, in most of those, it's either a June or a December graduation, because the date on my bachelor's degree is June, the date on my master's degree is December. And I didn't even go to the ceremony because I actually finished in August and started work in September, 1,500 miles away. I was not coming back to Colorado just to put on a silly gown and walk down an aisle. I'd already done that once.
Yeah.
But it's not a terribly. So write this as though you already have that degree, because that's what you. Now, obviously, if you actually are applying for a job without the degree because you're not going to graduate for another year, that's fine. Put down the expected graduation date. And in that case, you may or may not want to include your high school in your education for that application. Then your previous work experience. And again, the previous work experience should be relevant. And relevant really means anything you've done that will allow you to perform on the job. And that includes if you have not worked in field. It's not uncommon in our medical program, for instance, to have people who actually have worked in field. They've worked in nursing homes or they've worked in other settings. Put that down for sure. Even if you volunteered, that experience is something that you can point to and say, yeah, I've been dealing with patients for the last umpteen years, And we have students here who are getting their associate's degree who have that kind of experience. They've worked in nursing homes as aides, which doesn't require a college degree. They want people with a high school diploma, but that's it. That's relevant. If you've worked in retail, it's one of those days, I can tell.
Yeah.
If you've worked in retail, for instance, you have customer service experience. And really everything there's an element of customer service to virtually everything we do. So that's relevant. So when in doubt, put it down and we'll talk about it and what it adds to it. But remember, we're going one page. If you've had special honors, obviously one of the things that is a kind of thing, an award. If you won, just say you won your science fair competition, that can be useful if the job you're looking for, if it's relevant to the job you're looking for. It's something that you would definitely have as your in your portfolio, and possibly it would come up in the context of an interview. But if you've been in the military and gotten special commendations for anything you've done, that should be listed. And by the way, anyone who's been in the military should always list that these days. When I was getting finished with school, that was real iffy because we were just coming out. We were in the middle, actually, still, of the Vietnam War. And that was, some people saw military service as an asset, and some people did not. Fortunately, we have changed from that. But nonetheless, nowadays it's a good idea because, first off, there's the issue of military. Being in the military has a lot of positives in terms of your ability to work on a team, in terms of your being able to work under supervision and a structured system. It says a lot, and a lot of people will consciously or unconsciously give a veteran a slight advantage in a job search, in a job situation. If they're a choice between a veteran and a non-veteran, and they both look exactly alike in terms of their qualifications for the job, the veteran is as like as not to get the job, simply because of that experience. So that's something that should always go down. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about regular military service or reserve service. They're both service. So, so make sure you do that. One of the things that Cody and I talked about on Monday was he was an Eagle Scout. That might also be something worth noting. Somehow or another, either on the resume, but again, don't clutter the resume up. Don't make it so busy that somebody just looks at it and says, I can't read this. But somehow or another, that's useful because, again, you might be working with someone, you might be actually interviewing with someone who is an Eagle Scout. And you automatically are part of the fraternity, and it's useful. It is useful. So there's a lot of things that we want to do. So what I want to do is, first off, bring some of these things up. And so Sarai and Emily, you need to submit those resume and cover letters. We're going to start with Cody's because he's the one I have. I'm not picking on Cody.
No.
I'm not picking on Cody. Okay? All right. So I thought we had a resume. So let's go to that. Great. So I'm going to download this so I can actually make some comments on it then. But anyway, let's go through this. So Cody's, this is what's on screen now. I will try and make sure that as we go through this that I actually expose the rest of the document. I've been known to just be talking about things and forgetting to. But let's look at this. So right away we have a heading on this: name, address, and contact information. Again, a word about emails. I don't think any of you have this problem, but I've had people that have had emails like, He-Man 23. That doesn't work. An email should at least look professional, sort of. I mean, your name and it's like when I got my first email account, I can't tell you how many Michael Burks there are in the world, other than probably several million.
That's why my email's so long.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. In fact, I have a friend down in Westminster whose name is Kevin Smith. He has a nephew, Kevin Smith, and I've met 4 other Kevin Smiths in Colorado. So yeah, so Michael Burke is a common name. So I looked at a lot of variations for my first email account many years ago. on AOL. That'll tell you how long ago that was. But I could not find, I finally just gave up and said, okay, and I tried every variation, Michael Burke, Michael Thomas, couldn't get it. So then I tried just my first two initials in my last name, MT, but couldn't get that. And I gave up at that point and I said, okay, my birthday is May 9th, so MT Burke 59. That worked. And that looks fine. It is my name and an identifier. And Cody's got here, Cody Smith, 2006. That's fine. But be careful. I've seen, I had another student who put down her email as Hot Mama something or other. And I said, no. I don't want to get a new email.
Not good.
Get a new email.
Have a business email.
Let's not go.
They're gonna go.
Get another email.
Not.
That just does not work. And pardon?
Mine's confusing because it has my name in it. But there's like my dead cat's name in it.
Yeah. And
I don't know what to do with that.
yeah, well, one thing you might do for purposes of job hunting, and of course, if you establish a different email for job hunting, then you know that the only relevant emails coming in are going to be related to that. It makes it easy to look through. And you'll get some spam and some other garbage that comes in always. There's no way to avoid that. But you will, but that way you have an account. My wife did that. She established a second Gmail account for purposes, for a specific purpose, and linked that to her mini computer. And so anything that comes in on that account is related to that specific purpose. And I think my daughter has done the same thing because she's finally got the book contract signed, and her first book will be published in a year.
Nice.
Yeah, it is. It is. Hopefully she'll get
Very
a book tour
nice.
and we'll get to see her then too.
Yeah.
But, she's going to have that. And so I think she's established an account strictly to deal with that. And I can understand not wanting to have too many email accounts. You have to remember passwords. You have to remember what they are. You have to be sure that you only give out the one you want somebody to use, blah, 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 blah. Lots of reasons. But here's a good reason. And that is you want something that really does look professional. And as I said, even yours with your dead cat's name, Emily, I'm just saying you might want to consider establishing a second email for that.
It's just Emily Mocha.
Pardon?
It's just Emily Mocha. Nobody's ever gonna know.
Yeah, yeah.
Must be her first name or his last name.
Until they find out I have the most generic name ever.
Milka?
Anderson.
Milka?
My last name?
No. Your cat's name?
Mocha.
Mocha.
Okay.
Okay, I thought you said Milka,
That's what I thought.
which is a European chocolate.
Yeah, it is.
Very good.
It's really good.
Chocolate.
So yeah. So anyway, so that's something that I really strongly suggest, and use it only for your job searching, and that way you limit what comes in, that's one of the reasons I resisted for years, even going away from AOL. I just don't want it, but I have grown up. So then we have looking for a position as a tech support representative in your company. You can probably take out in your company. Okay. And again, if we go back and look at the job posting, it's for a tech support representative. And that's exactly what you want to say, because that's one of the things they'll look for. If you wrote and said you wanted to be an IT security specialist and were responding to a tech support job posting, you're likely to have it just thrown out. So, summary of qualifications: customer service, Microsoft Office 2010 and 2016, tech support. I'd probably move tech support to #1 position. Okay. Computer support, number 2. And then the rest of them, because you've got, then you've got a year's experience as a tech support, 2 years in computer support, and then 10 plus years in the rest of those things. So that's what I would do.
Sounds good.
Education, Bachelor of Computer Science, expected graduation March 2019. Right, expected graduation is because if you're applying for that job now, you would say that. What I would say under that is the specialized, anything specialized. Do you have the office certifications? Will you?
Maybe.
That's my response. You're supposed to say yes.
Yes.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Personally, so I would put that on your in your bucket list for this next year is to get those. I would and what under that when you have A, B, C, and D, I take that out. It's in the wrong spot to begin with. It would come at the bottom. You would want to work, especially the Eagle Scout. I would put that at the bottom under your military service. And then the rest of it's out because you cover it. You've got employment. And what I would also say is that one thing that's missing, you've got employment down here, IT support, work study student, name College America in Fort Collins. Okay, and then what you've done here is setting up the computers. Here's where you can put in the troubleshooting. There you go, troubleshooting, configure, yeah, okay. Proctoring the Pearson VUE Testing Center probably does say something about customer service. I would put that at the end of that list of experience. Okay. Delivery driver, again, name the company. Track vehicle mechanic at Fort Riley. Well, if someone doesn't understand that meant you were on active duty, they're liable to say, well, were you a civilian employee? So I would say United States Army.
Okay.
And then Fort Riley, Kansas, those years, and then the job, track vehicle mechanic. Okay. I really liked the issue of serving and recovering in security of over $1 million in vehicles. And okay. Yeah, I think that's fine. I would really, I might even move that second bullet up to the first.
Okay.
Because that says something that we'll talk about later, which is it gets to the question of tell me about a time that you, which is a question you're going to see in all your interviews. And so we'll get to that. We call those STAR stories: the situation, the task, the action, and the result. And we'll get to those in probably either next week or the week after, is thinking about those, because those questions will come up. And if you're not prepared to answer, you sort of look like you've got egg on your face. Yeah, you are. You're sitting there. Yeah. And that's not the way you want your interview to go. Right? So we want you to be able to be prepared. Since they know that you know, or they think that you know, that question is going to be asked. If you're not prepared for it, then you haven't prepared for the interview, which is a negative. So the whole idea is to walk into the interview ready. Can you anticipate everything that can happen in an interview? Not really, but there are some general characteristics of every interview, and that question is one of them. But the other thing is they may have your resume right in front of their faces and say, what kind of tracked vehicle did you work on? You may be talking to someone who is familiar with tracked vehicles because of their own military service. And so they're going to know that that's quite a range of different vehicle types. So you have to be prepared for that. In the case of Emily and Sarai, when you are if you have on your resume that you worked in some sort of like a nursing home for a while, or in some sort of assisted living facility, maybe, how they're going to ask you, what kind of clients you served. And so be prepared with that. Maybe even be prepared with very specific examples of how you actually helped some of those clients. I mean, it can be as little as, helping someone, deal with the aftermath of a fall, say, just how you help them recover. I think about that because we just, last summer my mother-in-law fell, and we're still dealing with the aftermath of that. It says a lot for what your experiences have been. Okay. So those are the major comments I have. I like the layout. I like the centering of the section heads, and I like the fact that they are bolded and all caps. Generally speaking, I don't like all caps except section heads, because what happens is they're going to be looking. What's your education? They find that section head instantly. So again, that's something that we really want to be able to find the section they're looking for. So the section heads can have lots of different titles. You might want to add a section head of objective to looking for blah, blah, blah. Because right below that, it almost looks like an extension of the header. So visually breaking things up. Also, it's perfectly legitimate to have your name in a larger font size, larger typeface size. But again, I urge you to use one font size throughout. Some people think it's okay or one font type throughout. And the preferred for most people are either Times New Roman or Arial. Times New Roman is what we call a serif font, which has the little
fancy end.
Yeah, the little rises at the end of letters and stuff, and Arial's sans serif, which does not. It's a very plain. They're very easy to read. Most people are very used to them. Some people will say it's okay to use a different font style for headings. I generally disagree with that. Consistency is critical. As I said on Monday, I've seen people write things with these script fonts, and or they think they're being real cute and they use Gothic. And
Trash.
most of us can't read that. It's not that we can't read it. It requires then a quick switch in our look at them. Totally off resumes. My daughter and her fiance were writing up announcements for their wedding this summer. And the first one they sent to us was totally unreadable because of the font that was chosen. We couldn't even read the names and we knew them.
What does this say?
We wrote back and said, you probably want to change this. And they obscured, they had a picture of themselves standing up at Horsetooth, which is a beautiful picture, but then they obscured their faces with typeface. Very artistic, but very unfunctional.
Mhm.
So the issue is, put no barriers up, because the first barrier they run into, it's gone. So let's take a look now at what am I bringing up? The job description. This is something that is, that again, our resume and cover letter are tailored to the job. So you're going to have a sort of a general resume and cover letter that you prepared, because most of the jobs you should be looking at are going to be similar enough to where you are not going to have to make major changes. But what you want is that, again, you want to read through and say, what are the job requirements? And this one's laid out. There's some, I was telling my communications class last Monday night that I didn't give them any details, but I said I read this job description where they repeated one of the requirements. And it just was, if they had submitted this as an assignment, they'd get dinged for it. So again, as I told my class, that the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that you've achieved it. But the job requirements, okay, so there are some things here that are requirements. The high school diploma or GED is the educational requirement. Age, you never reveal your age on a resume or a cover letter, or you don't volunteer that information in an interview. Okay? The reason you don't is that it is illegal to consider those things in some contexts.
Yeah.
Now, if you go in and you're obviously 12 years old, they can't hire you anyway. And they might ask. But if you are, but never give any of that. Never say things like, and I live with my parents. That's not their business. It doesn't matter. You might live with your parents. And you might not.
Yeah.
That's not relevant. But I've had students whose elevator pitches were, that's what they started off. I'm this many years old and I live with my parents and 2 cats and a dog. Okay, well, so what?
All right. Anything else?
Yeah,
For
right.
you.
Who are you? Yeah, exactly. So, let's be very clear that even if there's an age requirement, you're going to end up proving that in the interview if they decide to interview. And you're going to walk in, Cody, if you were applying for this job, you're going to walk in and they're going to say, okay, check that box.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have progeria, you are at least 18 years old.
Yeah.
The rest of this is all computer stuff. And basically, it's hard to know how you can put this in. I think you've done a good job on your resume of including much of this. But it's hard to, basic understanding of debits and credits. I mean, that's accounting. Discounts, interest, commissions, proportions, percentages. Those are all things that you probably covered in your high school algebra class. Okay? Because they're looking for a high school grad.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've been through that. Now, defining problems, and drawing valid conclusions, That's something a lot of people have a problem with. And here you go. You go back to your working in the Army. You had to solve problems. You had to collect data. You had to draw conclusions. You're maintaining a vehicle. That vehicle, if it breaks down, say in the middle of the Iraqi desert, can actually cost the lives of the men on board.
Yeah.
So, there's obviously a lot of that and attention to detail. So, working conditions are irrelevant. Employee remains in a sitting position for prolonged hours. Some people have that. Now, what does that mean? You're probably going to work in a cubicle. Does that mean you can't stand up and do your job? Well, you're probably going to be tethered to one of these, so you can stand up. If, I get tired of sitting. And sometimes I just have to stand up. I even have, at home, I have a standing desk. So that I have to stand up and I have to look straight ahead. I have a separate monitor and everything on that so that I can actually work and stand up, because sitting for too long is bad. We
It is bad.
evolved to move and we evolved to stand. Sitting was not part of our life. If you were sitting, you were literally a sitting duck, right?
Sure.
A target. So the rest of it, there's some stuff here. You're supposed to submit online. This is one of the reasons that we want to have keywords. This job description says, or the job posting says, you're going to submit it online. Obviously, they've made accommodations for people with specific kinds of disabilities, and that's fine. Obviously, that's not the major issue. But here, one of the reasons we want all of those keywords, all of those key requirements to appear in your application is so that when it goes through their electronic system, the system is set to flag specific terms and mark those as being and raise the review priority, because ultimately even an application online is reviewed by a human being. We're not quite at the AI capability to where that can be done all by machine. Eventually it'll be done by a human being. And so, but the human being is only going to see those that the electronic system flags as being appropriate. And we're seeing more and more of this. And especially we're seeing it a lot in the tech world. In medicine, it hasn't gone quite completely there, but it's getting. The bigger practices and hospitals will have some sort of screening program for these things. And even if they don't have you submit an online, they're likely to run it through an optical character reader and plug it in anyway. So so that's one of the things. So what you want, they mentioned salary here, and that's fine. They should give some idea, or at least they should say something about competitive salaries and benefits or something in there. Salaries are the last thing you worry about in the process of looking for a job. If you're a successful candidate, that's when you talk about it. If you're not a successful candidate, it's totally irrelevant. I've had people walking in saying, when they're asked, well, what is it you want out of a job? They'll say, well, I want a salary of $100,000 a year, blah, 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 blah. That is irrelevant at that point. When there's a whole section, I'm gonna, it's not in this shell, but I'm gonna upload some stuff as well about salary negotiation and some hints and suggestions. So never mention money initially. If they bring it up, if they say, what do you want to be paid? Dodge the question. Or the other thing you can do, I mean, here it's not an issue. They're telling you what they're going to pay, period. If you walk in and say, I want $15 an hour, they're liable to say, well, thank you very much. That's not what we pay. Then you have a choice. Take what they pay or not. Okay. The thing about anything else is you should go into a job situation having investigated the company. We'll talk about that too. And investigated what their salary ranges are. And we can get a lot of that information from the government's Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, for the area. They compile all that information. So money is the last thing you worry about at the stage of writing a resume. You're more interested in getting a face-to-face interview. You want to be able to walk in the door and then have people say, wow, we want to hire you. Okay. And come away knowing that you want to work with them, because that's the other thing that happens. You might walk in and decide this isn't the job for me. And there's lots of reasons that happens. Which is nothing against either you or the company. It's just that you walk in and you realize that it's not a good fit. The other thing that I would suggest on a resume, in terms of skills, if you speak any non-English language, and I don't care if it is, Royal Lao, I don't care. Let them know.
Klingon.
Yeah, Klingon.
Maybe not that one.
I know how to speak Klingon.
Yep. Well, yeah, there is that. Yes. That might be great if you want a job as a script writer for Star Trek.
Probably. Yeah, you never know.
But yeah.
Research employee.
But when I was in the Army, I was one of the guys that I was serving with was drafted out of the Peace Corps, and he had been in the Peace Corps. He'd been stationed in Senegal in Africa, and he spoke 2 of the tribal languages.
Wow.
You never know. You never know. Obviously, in this area, Spanish is an asset. We have a lot of Spanish-speaking people. We also have a lot of people who speak Russian. When I lived in Arvada, I walked into a grocery store. It was called itself a European deli. And I heard at least 6 different Slavic languages being spoken in that store. And I didn't understand any of them, but I've heard enough different languages that I knew each one was different. Because it was at least Polish, Ukrainian, Russian, I think Slovak, and one of the Baltic languages. Later on, I found out. But there were all these languages being spoken. And because it turned out we had a huge Russian population in Arvada. And they all had brought their elderly parents. The elderly parents would not speak English. I mean, most of them understood it, but they would not speak it. And we're very heavily involved with the Iranian expat community. And they all speak Farsi. Now, all the kids speak perfect English, of course. Most of the next generation up speak very good English. But the next generation after that, the grandparent generation, understands English. You can see it when you talk to them, when they're in a community. But you try to get them to speak English, and they won't do it because they are embarrassed by the lack of skill. And it doesn't matter. You can tell, look, your English is a heck of a lot better than my Farsi. Come on.
I don't know.
So it didn't work. But any time you speak an alternative language, let them know. I don't care how how obscure that language is. I mean, I picked on Royal Lao because I knew some people that actually in the 50s had been running a Catholic medical missionary station in the mountains of Laos.
Wow.
And they spoke 3 different languages that had no written form.
Wow.
Wow.
They spoke these 3 different languages. And, you know, when they came back to the States, we found out that we had a lot of Laotian refugees. And they needed that skill. So you just don't know. But but that's a skill that always should be emphasized.
Mhm.
All right. Let's go to cover letter. We're going to take a break in a few minutes. Cover letter, again, one of the things I emphasized is that the letterhead on the cover letter and the resume should be exactly identical. Okay, so then you start with the date. You have an address. This address, probably you should take out the extra spacing code and close it up. And great, Ray, tech support representative position. Perfect. You should always give a topic. Okay. Letter in response to your advertise on Indeed. As I said before, I'd probably go ahead and call it Indeed.com for the tech support representative position. So currently working on bachelor's degree in networking, some of the qualifications. Again, rearrange that to match up the qualifications on the resume. Additional information is contained in the resume, which is attached. You've got contented. It's very happy information. Okay. I appreciate the opportunity to apply. Okay. This is where at the end of the letter, you should always say that that you would call in a week to discuss the the status of my application and arrange an interview. That should be your last thing. Don't say, if I don't hear from you, I will call. That sounds like a threat. So just say, I will call you in a week. So that makes it a promise. And then you follow up.
Don't follow up.
Yeah. If you don't follow up, then
You're
toast. Yeah, right.
They're like, oh, no initiative.
Yeah, none. And that's really what you should be doing. Okay? Great. Now we're going to take a break. It's now 9:30. We'll take a break and then we'll come back and talk about you guys. Okay? And I'm going to turn off the recording for our break. Go away now, and I'm going to start the recording again. We're looking at initially at Emily's resume. I want to pull that up. So this is the screen being shared?
Yes.
Are we seeing Emily's
Yes.
resume? Okay, good. I never can tell. Sometimes when they stop recording, it may shut off the screen share. This actually does not. This looks like a. This is a cover letter, not a resume. I thought we had a resume that I was looking at, but that's okay. This is a cover letter.
They both have the same format.
Okay. This obviously was taken off on a template.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I would redo this entirely.
Oh, lovely. Where is this? The link?
In the
I emailed it to you. Go ahead, and if you just click on the link, it'll take you straight in. Okay. This was taken off a template, and it is really someone looking at it is going, and especially when you see recipient name, title, company. Obviously that goes.
Well,
But what I would do is in this block, and I would probably get rid of the outline. But in this block here, that's where I'd put your contact information, phone, your address, email, etc. I'd put that up there and get rid of this box, yellow box here. Again, that's sort of as a distraction. So, okay, when you're writing a cover letter, I mean, I understand that this comes out of this template. Dear recipient name. Well, you're going to send it to an HR director, or you would say to the HR director, the dear so-and-so needs a person's name, not dear HR director. Okay, to the HR director is what you would say, unless there is a specific name. It used to be there'd be specific names on a lot of these things, but nowadays they've gotten away from that. So, and here's where also I would say Ray, R-E, position title. Okay, the job posting title. Okay, I firmly believe that when you open up a letter, a cover letter, you should acknowledge where you found the position, what posting service they used, Indeed.com, Monster, whatever they happen to, Career Builder, whatever they're using. Let them know, because they really do need to know what's being an effective source of candidates. And it's a way of starting off giving a little back to them just for doing the posting, a little information. And it's usually viewed quite positively. And that may sound like a little bit of a trick, and it is, but nonetheless, it's an effective one.
They
And
get money for 'em.
yeah, it doesn't cost you anything.
No.
Right? Okay. So I would just say that, and I would say I would just leave out that first phrase. As someone who's been interested in the medical field, I was thrilled or very happy to see the position of posted on. And I believe that with my interest and education and knowledge, I will be a great asset to your team. That's a good positive statement. Nothing wrong with that. In the past, I've worked both in the medical field. Here is where this paragraph should say, right away, it should start listing your skill set. If they're looking for someone who is a medical assistant, that's where you say, I am a certified medical assistant. And any other skills that they want. Obviously, if you're looking for a medical assisting position, they're going to want you to be able to do, in Colorado, you can do phlebotomy. So they probably are going to say that you should be able to do phlebotomy, vital signs, patient histories, all those things. But there's where you list all of the things that you have been trained to do. And I have, and there also, again, you write it as though you have finished your program. Okay, because how soon are you going to finish, Emily? September. Okay, so that's coming up real fast. So I write this as though you finished your program, and say that you have an associate's degree in occupational specialties or occupational whatever the degree actually is titled here. Okay, but an associate's degree in medical specialties. There is where you emphasize that education, because that'll be potentially one of the job requirements. It'll either be a requirement or a nice to have. And the same with the certification as a medical assistant, if that's the kind of position this is. Sorry.
I am.
Yes, you do. I will keep that in mind. So what we can do then is just switch quickly to looking at yours, okay? And then we'll go back to this. All right. So Emily, this is not to cut this off too soon, but yes, I forgot that Sarai has to leave.
We didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to just hear talking about it.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. So let's go here. Oh, I'm not seeing a submission.
And I emailed it.
You emailed it. Got it. Then I will pull that up.
You might have 2 or 3 different ones. The most latest, the subject.
Okay. Resume draft. Got it. Okay, we'll download this. Open it. Okay. All right. There we go. All right. So again, right away, right at the top, we have the a good heading, and again, you've laid it out a little differently than Cody did. There are no rules. This is fine. Okay. The information is what's important. Professional summary. Okay, that is seeking a full-time job involving direct patient. That's fine. Again, professional summary or objective or whatever you want to call that section doesn't matter. Underlined and here I would actually start certified as medical assistant seeking. I put that on the next line down so that the heading is by itself. Okay. Clinical skills, phlebotomy, vital signs, injections, administrative EHR. Okay, great. Key competencies, good. Again, I just want to be sure that it matches your job posting that you're looking at.
Yeah, I'm putting a lot of those words.
Great. That's what we need. Education and certifications. That actually is not a bad way to do it. Okay. Because they're going to see that they're going to look at what your education is, and they're going to see that. And then they're going to look down here and say, well, what are your certifications? And one of the things that you really want to put down is your CCMA certification, Certified Clinical Medical Assistant, and the date you received that.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to be at the end of this mod.
Yeah. And the blood work pathogen is, I think, expired already, but I'm updating that one, so I didn't finish.
Okay. That's one that you can pull out of your resume. You want that in your portfolio and your master application because they're going to ask you what other certifications you have. For the important thing is that that's great that you're going to update it, and I think that's a wonderful idea. But you'll have to go through it every year on the job anyway. But I like that you've got BLS and CPR right away, and also this EHR specialist. That's good. That's good. That's a hard certification to get. It has a really bad rep. So it's good that you have that. Work experience, once upon a child, Newbridge Commons, personal care provider. You might just list here that you were working, that this is, that you were working with residents in an assisted living facility.
Where would I put that?
Right under, personal care provider, working with residents. I just continue it as a sentence, working with residents at this assisted living facility. So write it, you got a title here. I'd also, yeah, I would just follow that right on the end of that line about personal care provider, and I just continue it as a sentence, working with the residents in this assisted living facility.
Would it look weird if I went this way, or should I drop it down here?
No, just keep it going straight on there. It would not look weird if you just kept it going. And a cashier, okay, so that, again, good skills with customer service. And then as we discussed before, I take the references off. Okay, and you can put a little more space in here, especially between the heading and your first, the professional summary. Give it a little white space. You don't want a lot of white space on a resume, but you also don't want to make it look crowded, and that sort of looks a little crowded at the top. Okay, but other than that, I think this is a real good beginning of a resume. Okay.
The format doesn't look weird because centered.
Yeah, you can center them. Some ways that has its advantages, centering the headings. It just makes them stand out. But the fact that they're bold and underlined, they stand out already. So it's up to you how you want that to look. Yeah. And the only other thing I would do is I would put just an extra line in between the heading and the text under each heading. Again, that just sort of it makes it pop out a little bit more.
Hola.
Hello there.
Good morning, guys. Can we do a quick little announcements?
Yes, you may.
Wonderful.
Here's some sugar for everybody.
Oh my God.
Sugar.
It's still my
Okay, real fast. For career services side, you guys all know that I'm available for resume developing, working on cover letters, looking at job lead searches, that sort of stuff. Also managing your social media profile. Making sure that when people go to that Facebook page, it's not full of things that you may not want an employer to see. If there's anybody here in medical, there is a job fair being put on by the Larimer County Workforce today at Embassy Suites in Loveland between 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock today. I strongly recommend anybody in medical because it's all focused on healthcare. Go check it out. All right, guys. I turn it over to these guys.
Awesome. So real quick, for the people that we didn't speak to yesterday, tomorrow, we have a new lady in the education that's an assistant. Her name is Tempest. So definitely welcome her when you see her. You might see her when you're getting your scheduling or going back and seeing the education department. So welcome her. This is her first week on campus. We also have RAD nominations we want you guys to take full advantage of. There's nominations in the lounge, and so definitely when you guys are seeing these students exhibiting those, those qualities as a student, recognize them, please, or yourself, just so we can kind of have more people that are nominating students at the campus. You guys see the front row parking spot up front, so we definitely want, to show these students and the RAD student of the quarter every 3 months that, they get a lot of fun little quick incentives there as well. Jam sessions. I'm going to let Kelly talk a little bit about what's coming up next week. She's doing a really cool educational financial aid jam session.
Yeah, we're going to do a financial aid jam. So anything that deals with financial aid, college. If you guys have any friends, family, coworkers, anybody that thinks they can't afford college, let me show them otherwise, okay? Because you can afford college. We can make it happen. But there's different sources of funds that people don't think about. It's not always about loans. Also, if you know anybody who's maybe already graduated and they're having any issues dealing with their current federal student loans, have them come in. I'm happy to do the back end of it too and talk about different repayment plans and forbearance and all sorts of things that, yeah, you guys are like zoning out on me now. With that being said, I also, I think most of you are pretty good, but I just have to throw it out there. If you haven't filed your 1819 FAFSA, the time is now. We need to get it done. Yeah, we're good. But I still have $5 Starbucks gift cards at the lower end. Come in and get that vial. Okay.
So take advantage of that. April's kind of like financial aid literacy
Awareness
month. So take advantage of it. Medical students, please take advantage of the jam sessions that's going on in the medical lab. Nate's doing the phlebotomy this week, and then in a couple weeks it's going to be vital signs. Encourage, yourselves to come, hopefully, but also, friends, family, coworkers. They're all welcome. So it's open to the public for either Kelly's workshops, the medical workshops. We even have IT workshops for virtual reality. So there is a sign-up sheet up front. Take advantage of that. Whoever you want to invite, they're more than welcome to come. Just put their names down on the front desk where we have a little sign-up sheet so we can tally who's coming in. But again, it's open to the public, so take full advantage of these opportunities for you guys. Any
Or
questions?
show off what you guys do. Bring in family and be like, this is what I'm doing. It's kind of cool.
Mhm.
Kind of cool.
They get to see frontline what you guys are doing. So, any questions?
Anybody want anything else before I walk away? Cody. Specifically Cody.
Thanks, Mike.
Oh, thank
There
you.
go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There was supposed to be a jam yesterday, and I came 5:30,
Really?
and it was supposed to be one for, I think it was supposed to be for training for the health fair,
Yeah.
and nobody was here. Nobody was gonna show up, and no teacher
Jim.
was here at all.
Maybe today.
It
We
is
don't
today and tomorrow. I know they're open, but they're not for the health fair. For the health fair,
Talk to
All of
Tell
it is
Chantel.
involving
when you go
the
into class.
health fair.
Do
Oh.
class, because I wasn't here yesterday, so I didn't.
and I know you're in charge of robotics.
Well, yeah, yes, I am in charge of the phlebotomy students at the health fair this year. That's always fun. I love doing that, actually.
That is fun.
It's fun, but yeah, I am. One other comment. As I look down here and see your other certifications down here, you've got graduated May 2018, then immediately it's date received. I would put another space between May 2018 and date received to really set that off.
Okay, I just thought
Visual.
it would be like too much white.
Yeah, well, let's see what it looks like. Because I don't see that there'd be too much white. So I like the information you have, and I think those are the comments that I really have about your resume. When you do your cover letter, again, I haven't looked at your job posting, so let's get a copy of that. Just cut and paste it into a Word document and take a look at that. But just make certain that you emphasize in the cover letter the job you're looking for, and and start it off with the first paragraph, saying that you're very interested in the job posted on whatever, and then your next paragraph talks about why you're the right person, the skills you have, the education you have, the certifications you have. This list of certifications is actually a very good list. They will undoubtedly want the BLS and the CPR. That's key. And in fact, that's going to be something that will probably be in the job posting. I don't know. A lot of times they are.
Like CPR was specifically written out like that.
Yeah.
So put it down.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Use their language. I'll use abbreviations because I'm lazy, but use their language. And as I said, being an having the EHR certification that's a great one to have.
They specifically say uses universal blood and bodily, no body fluid precaution at all times.
Right.
And you wanted me to keep the bloodborne pathogen in my
Then-
pocket.
Then actually, if they actually say that, put that down. Yeah, because that says that you've at least been trained in that. And I will tell you that I have seen medical assistants fired for not following universal precautions. So, you know, it's really something that they're concerned about. So the more you keep that in mind, the better. So that's my comment there. And with the closing paragraph should always commit you to following up. But as I say, don't say something like, if I don't hear from you in a week. You know, obviously I can be contacted anytime at the above email or telephone, and I will call you in a week to follow up on the application. All right. So this is a great start. So all we want to do is tweak it and make it better. All right. So,
Keyword visible.
keywords need to be visible.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know where I got that from, but I wrote it on my arm.
It is. I think it comes right out of here, actually. That's actually a very good phrase. Yeah. But it probably comes out of your textbook, to tell you the truth.
I got something from you that I wrote my arm to. I don't know. I feel like that's just a daily minute hour reminder.
Yeah. Well, my daughter writes them on the palm of her hand, and I'll look at her and I'll say, "Do you lose it when you wash your hand?"
Or you shake a lot of people.
Yeah, right. Put ink all over somebody else. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah, again, you want to come in as someone, you want to be seen as someone who's a real good candidate, even if you don't get that job. If you're seen as a good candidate, then they will often keep your resume, because all these places, especially if it's a large office or a hospital system or something, they're always hiring. I mean, our medical practice that we use here is a big one. I don't know how many physicians they have, but they have a ton of MAs, and so they have to be hiring all the time. So, you know, make sure that you as I said before, burn no bridges. You know, just make sure that everybody's real happy with you. Okay? Great. So I'll look for your cover letter. Now, Emily, let's go back to your cover letter. Again, this very positive statement, company is a perfect fit for me because I do well with fast-paced environments and with patients and their families. This job is a perfect match for both my experience and personality. I like the content. I think there is possibly a way to say it, because it almost I would actually maybe move that second sentence to the beginning of the paragraph, okay, and then start the next sentence by taking out the first phrase. Start with, I do well with fast-paced environments and get along very well with patients and their families. So I would just change that a little bit. Welcome a chance to talk, show that I'm a great fit for your company. I will call you in a few days. The position that this is based on, or that you started with, has already been filled, so you know how fast this can happen. But I will call you in a few days to follow up on my application and schedule an interview. That may or may not help, I'll be honest. In a fast-paced environment, they may call you. If they like you, they may call you right away. And if they're really looking for someone, it could happen. As an example, when I started at College America down in Denver, I met a College America representative at a job fair. They were actually recruiting students, and I said, "Do you hire faculty?" "Yes." And I said, "Well, I'm interested in that." And the person who was actually from admissions took my resume back to the school, and that afternoon I got a phone call. And the next day I went in for an interview. And the next week was the beginning of a mod, and that's when I started. That fast. So things can happen in a hurry. And be prepared. Be prepared to jump on it if that does happen. But, okay, so I would reformat. I'd do away with this template. Templates are a nice idea. They get you to thinking. But I think that what you don't want to do is make something look like you just took a template. Okay, and you know, everybody knows about Word templates. We use them all the time, and there's nothing wrong with them. In fact, they force you to actually think about the material you're going to be putting in.
Yeah, that's why I like them, because there's no way I can do any of this by myself.
Yeah, so now we're talking about how you can rearrange it. Okay, so those are my comments on the cover letter. Let's take a look at the resume itself. Okay. So obviously you'd want to have the same heading.
Ignore the objective box. It didn't save again.
I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, it didn't save?
Again.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know the objective. The objective is to obtain a position as a.
Yeah.
Okay, that's easy. Okay, and I like the idea. The only thing about this particular template is that I think that these headings, they look like they are in a different font than what's written down there.
It's actually the same font.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. Except caps lock.
Yeah,
And not bolded.
it should be bolded, and the rest of it should not.
Yeah, I know. I thought
So,
it
okay.
looked a little bit funky, but
Okay, well, you can fix that. Okay, so you've got skills. Okay, so you're going to be finished with, you're going to have your degree. You'll have part of your degree at the end of your Med 299 will be to get a certification. So treat this as though you're finishing your program. And you've got that. Where you are is in your externship. And by the way, for both of you in the medical, think carefully about where you want to do your externship.
Yeah, I definitely want to do it somewhere where I want to be hired there.
Yep, because we find that a lot of times after you've been there and worked there, they look at you and say, "Yep, we want you." So somewhere that you might like to work. And being a day student, you have a lot more choices. Our night students have a tough time.
thanks.
Well, your medical facilities are not open at night. We're just about limited to pharmacies.
I'm not worried about what time of day it is.
Yeah.
Not like I can get a freaking job anyway.
Well, then you are but a number of people are working full time and during the day. That's hard. Also, don't worry about finishing your externship in one mod. It's nice if you can do it, but usually most people take at least 2 mods because they're working. They don't have 40 hours a week. They can be working for free. If you can get an extern job, pardon?
I do. I still live with my parents, but
Yeah.
I want this to move me out.
Oh, yeah.
You got this.
I have to grow up now.
Yeah. I noticed, by the way, just nosy, I noticed that there was Sarai Huerta 4-4. Is your birthday April 4th? Or you just picked 44?
44. I don't know why.
It's whatever,
I think I went 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I just added another 4.
And then it worked, yeah.
And you're like, oh,
Yeah, yeah. After a while, you just give up. Yeah. Okay. It's now 10:30. So let's go ahead and take our second break. You need to go off to class. So we'll come back and talk about Emily's resume after the break, and then you guys can get to work on some of the other things. Okay. That need to be done this week, and then we'll convene again at the end of class for a while. So, okay, have a good class. Sorry.
Have fun.
You know what you're doing today?
I think we're practicing
On the recording again. So here we are, looking at Emily's resume. Okay, so the skills list. Again, you need to go back and look at the job description. What skills do they want you to have? And that's what you list. Then if you have other skills as well, you can list them. There's nothing wrong with that. But you want to be sure that if they want people who have experience with, say, phlebotomy and that sort of thing, that's there. 3 years experience in patient caregiving, that's fine, but what does that mean? And that really comes with your job experience. Okay. But what you want is to make it clear that you have the experience they want in this position. And again, rearrange it. I probably look at the information you've got here, which is great, and then reformat it along the lines of what you were seeing from Sarai and Cody. Okay. So, experience. Experience always comes, okay, the order of these things really is objective. Great, you've got that. Then you've got qualifications, certifications, skills, whatever you want to call that sector. That's where you list the skills that you have that you really want people to focus on. Okay, and that you actually have. Customer service is important. Cashiering probably isn't. Okay. Then your education is next. Education should be right after that because again, they're going to want to know what your education is. And here and up in your qualifications is a good place to put your CPR and basic first aid certifications. With your degree from school, again, I would say you have no need to put down your college education. I mean your high school, your high school diploma. As I said before, the assumption is always going to be that you have a high school diploma or the equivalent to have gotten into school. So, not necessary. Other experience. See, the way this is set up, it's kind of hard to read. That's why I don't care for a lot of these templates. So the other experience, again, if you put experience after education, you just keep it going. Okay. Freddy's Restaurant. What you want to do is list the employer, and then list your position, and then the dates. And you can simply say, rather than 06/2017, I would say June 2000. Write out the month. Okay. my preference. I don't know that that is anything other, quite frankly, than my preference. In your education, your associate's degree would be listed, College America, and then the date. Okay, September 2018. Okay. If you apply for a job now, obviously you're going to say expected graduation date.
That's why that.
Yeah, of course. But we're looking at this as though you're out there as a candidate with all the qualifications. Other experience. Other experience. The farmers market and the coffee cart are, I don't think, terribly important. It's something to.
It's literally the only thing I have to show for myself.
That's okay. You're young. You haven't had time to be in the workforce. The fact that you've got the care here at Columbine, working in a long-term care facility. That's relevant. Front of the house is relevant in terms of customer service. You can, depending on the way the rest of the resume falls out, if you feel like there's way too much white space, you can note that you worked in the farmers market and on the coffee cart while you were in high school. Again, that's customer service. You're dealing with people.
Yeah, I like it. It shows that I actually did something else with
Yeah.
my high school time other than just ditching classes and smoking pot. Because that's what I did.
I would never put that in a resume. But,
That will stand out.
yeah, that will. So I would completely reorganize this along the lines that we've seen. Also, if this is something that you're asked to upload into because a lot of times when you apply for a job, they'll say, upload your resume. And they'll say, go ahead and take your Word document and copy it into this location. This stuff won't translate into their system very well.
And go, what's this?
Yeah, it'll just have a hard time recognizing it. And it may actually be more of a problem than a help. I mean, these templates are all nice and good for show, but in terms of practical use, you're better off just having something that's just real easy to follow. Here with this template, you have to bounce around on the page a lot to get the information. And
I just don't like stereotypical resumes. They're boring.
yeah, they might be, but they're effective. And you have to sometimes swallow that and be boring but effective.
You want the job.
Yeah. And, what happens is, as I said, the whole purpose of a resume and a cover letter is to get the interview. That's their function. Because it's at the interview that people decide they want you. Now, if you're just, applying for, even if you're applying for a job, working the stove at McDonald's, you're going to have an in-person interview, one way or the other. And so that's really how you're hired. Even if someone looks at your resume and says, oh, this person looks perfect. Looks perfect is different than walking in the door and being perfect. So what we want to do is have you look perfect here and then teach you how to be perfect when you walk in the door.
Yeah, I mean, that's not going to happen.
No, I disagree. That can easily happen.
It will happen.
Can easily happen. And
there's a reason I've been unemployed since November.
Well,
You get-
then what you have to what I suggest you do, Emily, is do your best to get rid of the attitude that there is a reason. You're unemployed. That's just a fact. Period. Leave it at that. What we're trying to do now is find a way to make sure that you don't stay in that condition. And quite frankly, you won't. But, you know, we also don't want you to be a sign spinner for Liberty Tax.
Money is freaking money.
Money is money, and there's nothing wrong with that for a short term, but you don't want to do it for a career.
Nope.
If I didn't have the day classes on, I would be actually working. Because that was a good idea.
Well, you can always talk to Christy about going back to nights.
I didn't think this class was offered at night, and that's why she put me in.
Well, it wasn't this mod. It was offered at it wasn't even last mod because it was strictly with my group. It was strictly online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just depends. We schedule based on when we can have a class. So anyway, and it's good that you were flexible enough to be able to do a day class. Because I'm glad we have a chance to talk face to face about your resume, because I think the information's fine. I just want to see it laid out in a way that someone will find what they want and find what you want them to know about you. Okay. All right, so that's what I have to say about that. So let's. What I'd like to do is for you guys now to spend the rest of spend pretty much the rest of this class. I want to look at a couple of things. Spend pretty much the rest of the class working on revising these documents. You all right?
Hiccups.
Yep. You'll be all right.
Like,
Hold your breath and swallow twice.
Okay, and okay, so I've been recording this. I'm going to shut the recording off. Tim, the code word for this class is Swansea, SWANSEA. So send that to me in an email. I will come back on just before Cody and Emily leave, just to wrap up and review what we're going to be doing next week. So I'm going to shut off the recording now and come back on in a while. Okay, so I'm back on recording, and I'm looking at the at week one. There is an assessment, a quiz for this week. My view on quizzes is that quizzes are supposed to be learning experiences. So in general, other than your final exam that you take in my classes, you'll find that my quizzes can be repeated. You can do it up to 3 times. I don't usually put a time limit on these things either. So I want you to use them as a learning tool. Finish off the revisions and submit them as part of assignment of the week 1 assignment. And that revisions of both the cover letter and the resume. So let's get those done. Next week, we're going to be talking, your discussion is about interviewing. Don't forget this week to do the second part of your discussions, which is to do the postings, the responses. Interviewing, well, there's several questions in there. And I would suggest that you do a couple of things. One is go back up in the course to Course Home to the course media page, where you have each week laid out. Each week there were a number of these videos for week 1 that I thought were pretty good, pretty useful. Week 2 also has a bunch of videos, plus you're looking at chapters 3, 4, 7, and 8 in the book. And we're looking at networking and interviewing itself. We'll talk Monday morning about networking, but I want you to read these things, and we'll talk about what you've learned about, and in terms of preparing for the class, about the various forms of networking and some of the pros and cons of the various forms of networking. They talk here about cover letter documents. We worked on cover letters in this week, so there is some information about them. And the here and some of the links that we have. Make sure that you continue with that in your reference list. And I want to highlight something called the master application, which is a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. That is something that you prepare. The master application really is all the information you might need if you are applying for a job. Often you will, if you are brought into a company, they're going to want more information. So your master application is the sort of your sort of reminder of what you want to include on an application. It also goes along with the portfolio, which ultimately contains all of these things. It contains your resume, cover letter, references, reference letters, if you have reference letters to provide. Reference letters are often provided from your friends, so that it prompts an actual conversation sometimes with the references. But if you can get reference letters from your friends, and references, professional and otherwise, that's fine. Reference letters don't have to be gigantic. They don't have to be a big job. But the master application includes all of the information about your work history, including every job you've ever had. Why do we do that? Well, occasionally somebody wants to know more detail, and it's nice to have it if you as a reminder. If someone says, well, what were you doing in high school, Emily? You can go back and say, well, in high school I actually worked at the farmer's market, and I worked on the coffee truck at the school. Okay, that's great. We like hearing that. Or it might be a case of, you have a gap in your employment. What was going on? I was in school. First off, remember to keep the answers short. Don't give details. You don't want to say, well, I was in school because I lost my job. Then the next question is, why'd you lose your job? And that might be something that you're not really wanting to go into, because it might be, and it's largely irrelevant. I mean, you lose your jobs for lots of reasons these days, but it's largely irrelevant. But occasionally you're going to have to, explain why there are gaps. And there are good reasons. My wife and I have a 2-year gap in our employment record because we spent 2 years backpacking around the world.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was great. And in the process, we did a lot of things. We actually did work. We picked apples in New Zealand for a couple of weeks just to get to know people and work with people. It was great fun. And we worked in Australia to pay for a tour of China, which you could only do with groups at that time. You could not just go to China.
Yeah.
So you had to go in with a tour group, and we wanted to go. So, we did, did those. And then, the rest of it was traveling around the world and just seeing places and meeting people. So
That's cool.
that's, that actually, I think, got me a job at one point, was
Yeah.
because I actually included that on my resume. 2 years backpacking around the world with my wife. And, somebody, and that's all they wanted to talk about.
Like, tell us.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about. So I mean, you want to be able to fill in the gaps and explain a few things. But the master app contains all the your last several years worth of addresses. Not that most people care, but occasionally someone wants to know about your stability. If if you worked 6 months in Denver and then 3 months in Topeka and 2 months in Birmingham, it better be because you were a traveling nurse. Okay, and that's also, you've already pointed that out, that you were, in your experience, that you worked for a traveling nursing agency and you traveled around a lot. I've got a friend who's doing that right now. She's really got a really horrible assignment, Monterey, California.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So rough.
We saw her husband recently after she took off on that. And we said, "Okay, Larry, how soon are you heading to Monterey?" He said, "Saturday."
Well, in a
So
couple of-
yeah. But there are lots of things. The master app, it's a spreadsheet. It's laid out for you. Just fill it out. So it's part of keeping this. And we want to just keep working on. We want to keep reviewing and improving our resume and cover letter throughout the course. Now, there's a lot of stuff in this class, the way this class is laid up, about scheduling your mock interview. I've got a team of interviewers that are coming from our PACs, our program advisory committees, who come in here and voluntarily do these interviews. And so I am contacting them and finding out who's going to be available the last week of class to actually do those. And Tim, when you're listening in on this, it would be really good if we can get you in here personally for that. I know you work some odd hours. We can probably arrange some things for that. So please, why don't you let me know what your work schedule is now so I can start working with our interviewers. When you do that, you will be expected to, one of the things we're going to spend in part of our time is interview dress and that sort of thing, and body language. We're going to talk a lot about that in the third week of class, so that you're ready. I can always tell when it's interview day. When I was down in Denver, I didn't teach this class. We had a couple of other people. I could always tell it was interview day because the students came in looking like they were ready to go out, ready to go on an interview. And they were actually doing an interview. So they would dress for it. So that being the case, we would expect to do that. So I say, Tim, please let me know what your schedule is. And I will be talking with my interviewers that I've been working with for a while and getting them in here to do some interviews. So, questions? Okay, we do, as I said before, we have a quiz. Go ahead and get that out of the way and finish off with second drafts of your resume and cover letter. Work on your reference list. Okay. You may want to start talking to people that you want to include on that to make sure that that's okay. And then we'll keep working on that as part of the class all through the month. Okay. So if there are no other questions, we can end class now. Okay. Great. So Tim, I'm going to stop the recording.